أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I think this is our first circle in 2018, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, mashallah. I don't know if you know this. And that's the end of the dars. Bismillah. I don't know if you know this, but we decided to change the topic slightly of these discussions from stories in the Qur'an to just reflections from the Qur'an, right? Because primarily, first, I run out of stories to talk about, and secondly, there are so many beneficial lessons from the Qur'an. It's endless, and I think just limiting it to stories is, limiting, the topics that we can discuss as well. And just, we don't want to just force something into a story in order to discuss it. So we'll probably just be taking maybe a few ayat or a portion from the Qur'an and just reflecting on lessons from those, right? And I was thinking of trying to keep it short as well, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes or something like that, to make it more sustainable, inshallah. So what I wanted to talk today about is probably, I don't know why in particular, but this is, I think, my favorite surah, one of my favorite surahs, the beginning part of it. And I don't know why exactly, but maybe I was in a good mood when I first read it as a child or something. But I feel like a special attachment to this surah for some reason, right? And it's a magnificent surah, Surah al-Mutaffifin, right? And I wanted to just for us to collectively reflect on just the first part of it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أن أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ويل للمطففين الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون ألا يظن أولئك أنهم مبعوثون ليوم عظيم يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ, woe, or a dua for, a bad dua for somebody's destruction or something like this. Woe to the mutaffifin, people who do something called tatfif, right? I'll just translate it quickly, and then we can discuss it in more detail, inshallah. So, woe to those people who do tatfif. When those people, when they measure something, get something measured to buy something, right? They force people to give them full measure. You bought 10 kilos of potatoes or whatever. They make sure, right, the person gives them exactly 10 kilos. But when they weigh in order to sell something, or when they measure something in order to sell something to someone else, yukhsirun, they themselves, they try and just scrape a bit off the top and give people less than they've agreed to give them. أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ. Don't these people know, or don't these people suppose that they're going to be resurrected لِيَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ, for a great, magnificent day. يَوْمَ يَقُومُ النَّاسُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, the day on which people will stand, i.e. for judgment, before the Lord of the worlds. Now, some of the Sahaba, they reported that before the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, they said they were very bad at weighing. Not just in a kind of sloppy way, but they would, people would cheat. Cheating was widespread in the markets there. Until one narration says that we used to have two scales, two sets of scales, one for buying and one for selling. Right? To skew it in your favor. But they said then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed wailul al-Mutaffifin. And by this, either it's meant that that's when it was revealed for the first time, or that's when, it was told to them and applied to that situation. And then after that, they became the best people at weighing. SubhanAllah, this is the Sahaba, this is the Ansar, right? I.e., when the Prophet ﷺ came and they entered into Islam and they took his oath of allegiance, and these ayat, they had an effect on them, not just in otherworldly matters. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why I really like this surah, right? Of course, one of the main jobs of any prophet and messenger is to connect people to Allah, to inform people about the day of resurrection and the hereafter, and Allah should be worshipped alone. But another very important job of prophets and messengers was to make sure there's justice on earth, was to make sure there's justice in the marketplace, was to make sure there's justice in the courts. Right? Many people suffer from some kind of delusion. Many of us, we might suffer from a delusion that, the Islamic stuff should be in one domain in our life. Right? Just maybe aqidah, and by which that person would, mean just a very strict theoretical exercise, right, or academic discussion. That's the Islamic or spiritual maybe domain, right? But in my public life, in my business, in my transactions, in my dealing with people, in my job, my career, everything, that's got its own set of rules. No. Prophets and messengers were sent to ensure justice. Not only justice, but ihsan. To promote ihsan, excellence, going beyond the call of duty, going beyond kindness, mercy, justice, and so forth. They were sent to ensure this, or to call for this in all domains of life. Right? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. What is tatfif? There are many examples given to kind of picture what tatfif is. Tatfif isn't like really obvious, clear cheating. That's obviously haram. Right? But the thing about tatfif, which is so maybe shocking to have it so strongly condemned by Allah Azza wa Jal, is that tatfif is kind of like just skimming a little bit off the top. Like when you fill up a bottle, when they fill up a bottle of water, they always leave a gap at the top. I mean, I've drunk a bit of this, it's usually more than this. But if maybe they usually leave some air in there. Right? Now, that is tatfif, if done with the intention of saving water. Do you get what I mean here? Just something so small that a person wouldn't even recognize, the buyer wouldn't even care or recognize. I asked for 10 kilograms of something, he gave me 9.99 kilograms. Right? So normally, that doesn't really matter. It's understood amongst people that, minor little things that's within the kind of error, you can say. But the censure of tatfif is those who do so out of greed. Right? Now, this is significant for a few reasons. Right? Number one, look how strongly Allah has condemned this. Waylun. Waylun is a dua for su', a dua for evil to occur to that person. Right? A very strong condemnation. Tatfif, then so this strong condemnation is coupled with something which is materially very, very minor. Right? So tatfif is like just like, for example, giving 9.9 kilograms instead of 10. The buyer won't notice, right? But it all belongs to Allah in the first place. Right? It's all Allah's. Allah is not looking at by how many grams did this person cheat. Allah is looking at his heart. Does he have that selfishness? Does he have that miserliness? Right? And it's described in more detail. إِذَا كَالُوهُمْ الَّذِينَ إِذَا اكْتَالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ, those who demand full يَسْتَوْفُونَ, those who demand full measure from people. Demanding full measure is not something, haram or anything. If you pay for 10 kilograms, it's okay for you to demand 10 kilograms, if you agree that with somebody. But it becomes blameworthy when وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزَنُوهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ. But when they themselves weigh something to sell or measure something to sell, they try and just skim a bit off the top. I.e., one rule for somebody else and another rule for me. But another reason why this is significant, i.e. the kind of material smallness, we can say, of tatfif, of censuring it so extreme, in such an extreme way, you can say, is if you censure tatfif, which is the smallest type of cheating, then what about clear cheating? What about stealing? What about oppressing someone? You can imagine somebody, this is a well-known, device in Islamic law, Islamic legislation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, He says to your parents, don't say uff to your parents. Right? Don't say uff to your parents. Uff is the least you can utter out of disrespect to insubordination. Uff is like this. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't, we don't need to have an ayah that says don't, disrespect your parents. We don't need to have an ayah that says don't, astaghfirullah, strike your parents or talk to them in an evil way. Because Allah has even made the slightest uttering of displeasure towards one's parents forbidden. So therefore, anything greater than that is also forbidden, and censured even more so. Likewise, Allah forbade tatfif. Not only that, He censured it with a very stern condemnation. Tatfif, just skimming a few grains of barley or whatever off the top. He censured that, so what about anything greater than that? And imagine a person who's listening to this, they're thinking now, wow, well, I better fix up my business practices, I better do this, I better do that, right? Because this is something Allah hates. Allah hates injustice. And the whole of Islamic, what we can call Islamic business transaction, or Islamic business, or Islamic finance, or Islamic economics, or whatever you want to call it, it's very simple, right? If you approach it in a theory, from a theory perspective, the theory is everything is halal, and Allah has made certain things haram. You have to be careful of those things, such as dhulm, injustice. Right? Even the slightest level of injustice is haram. Like when you agree 10 kilograms of this or 10 kilograms of that, you make sure he gives you your 10 kilograms, but you give him back your 9.9 kilograms. Because the issue is that, putting your personal desires before justice. That's what Allah hates. And other things, for example, that we have to avoid. Riba, obviously, right? Usury, ghish, cheating, which is his type of cheating as well. Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ghasha laysa minna." This is a very stern warning. Whoever cheats is not from among us. Right? And a lot of individual rulings in Islamic fiqh, when it comes to transactions, they fall back to one of these things. And some say they all come under the rubric of dhulm, preventing injustice in business. Right? But sometimes we live in a time and a place where this might seem a bit odd. Right? Because this type of selfishness or this kind of cutthroat mentality is sometimes praised in the corporate world, right? Trying to get one over on the counterparty, on the person you're having a transaction with, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put rules in place to prevent, not only to prevent injustice happening, but to push us to want to be more fair and more just. Right? For example, there is a well-known ruling in Islamic fiqh, right, of buyu', of prohibition of talaqqi al-Qur'ān, the prohibition of going and meeting a caravan that's bringing goods into the city. Right? What would happen before? People would trade by, a group, whatever, getting their stuff together, sending it to another city, buying, selling that stuff, and then getting some of their products in exchange, and then traveling around like that. Right? So talaqqi al-Qur'ān is when you go out of the market into maybe the motorway, you can say, and wait for the traders to come and start buying and selling there before they've entered the market. Why? Because maybe you can get a better deal, you can buy their stuff for cheaper if they don't know what the market price is going to determine as its price. Right? So not necessarily haram, but they, for example, withhold the right to return or cancel the transaction if they found out that I sold you this for £5, but when I came to the market I found out the going rate for it is £10. So they can, they have a right to refund or cancel that transaction. Right? But so to us this sounds a bit weird, because isn't the point of business to try and get the lowest price from your seller and get the highest price from your buyer, right? It's a tough, it's a tough line to walk, right? But this is where barakah comes in. You can still be a millionaire if you have an ethical kind of halal, or if you operate your business with ihsan, with excellence and with kindness, right? Because true business is cooperation. True transactions should be a cooperation. right? You have something I want, I have something what you want. Let's just, discuss this now and make this transaction, right? Not only that, okay, so that's all well and good. So that is the ideal, right? That you carry out your business transaction in a fair way. But as for those who do tatfif, the mutaffifun, right? Allah says in it's a question technically, but it's out of censuring them. Don't these people know that there's going to be a day of resurrection? Right? أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ. I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday, old friend of mine, non-Muslim, and he said to me, he's like an agnostic or an atheist, and he said to me, if people believe in God, they won't cheat as much. It's generally, or they won't go to such extremes of kind of immoral behavior, right? It's perhaps unpopular to say this, but it's true. Generally speaking, somebody who feels, right, that they're going to be held to account, the person is far less likely to go to an extreme in dhulm, right? Rather than if you think this earth is all there's no resurrection, I can do what I want, enjoy your life, that person is going to be more likely to do this type of behavior, right? Unless he thinks or she thinks that they're going to get in trouble with the law or something. Hence why such an inflated, police apparatus or surveillance state, is required, or is said to be required now, right? To the big brother to make people feel that they're still always being watched, not by Allah, not the deeds aren't recorded by the malaika. No, that their big brother is watching them, or the police, or there's cameras, to catch them out when they step out of line, right? Now, there's a very interesting hadith that mentions tatfif, right? And it's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said to the Sahaba, khamsun bi khamsin. Right? And in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ outlined almost kind of 5 like natural laws, right? 5 things will happen as a result of 5 things, right? 5 things will happen as a result of 5 things. The Sahaba said, what are these 5 things, Ya Rasulullah? وَمَا خَمْسُ بِخَمْسٍ يَا رسول الله. قال إذا نقض قوم العهد ما نقض قوم العهد إلا سلط الله عليهم عدوهم. A people, a nation, a people doesn't go against or betray their covenant, i.e. with Allah, except that Allah will smite them with their own enemies. This is number 1, right? A people will not go against their covenant with Allah of obeying Allah, worshipping Him alone, establishing justice in their dealings and so forth, except that Allah will allow their enemies to overcome them. This is number 1. The second, وَمَا حَكَمُوا بِغَيْرِ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا فَشَى فِيهِمَ الْفَقْرِ. And they will not, the second is, they will not either rule or judge disputes according to what Allah revealed, except that poverty will spread amongst them. Right? poverty will spread amongst them. And we see this. We see this in every any time where rulings of justice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, either explicitly through prophets and messengers, or even the remnants of previous laws, previous shari'ahs that were sent to different peoples, right? Those, if people keep to those, then there will be a sense of balance and barakah, in the nation, in the people. Even if that is a disbelieving people, subhanallah. Right? If they at least judge their disputes according to the general guidelines and the rules that Allah has revealed, either now or whatever they have left of their previous messages, right? Then there won't be the kind of extremes of poverty that we witness today. Right? It's hard for us to see the connection or the cause for why there's so much extreme poverty in some parts of the world. Right? But, for example, poverty in sub-Saharan Africa is directly linked to certain policies in the European Union. Right? With regards to trading laws allowing trade with certain countries and protectionist policies for certain countries, right? At the expense of others. Even in the last 50 years or so, the gap between the richest and the poorest has gone up by a factor of like 800 or something crazy like this, right? So when a people don't rule or don't judge according to what Allah has revealed, then poverty will spread amongst them. And remember the famous story of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, right? The caliph in Banu Umayyah, who was called the fifth rightly guided caliph, Khalifa, right? In whose rule, because there was so much justice, there was barakah, there was, the fruits were larger. They couldn't find people stretching from such a wide expanse of land who were poor enough to accept zakah, for example. Right? The third thing the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in his hadith, وَمَا ظَهَرَتْ الْفَاحِشَةِ فِيهِمْ إِلَّا فَشَى فِيهِمْ الْمَوْتِ. SubhanAllah. Lewdness or sexual promiscuity, right, doesn't become prevalent among that people except death will spread in that people. And in other hadith, other narrations of the hadith, except diseases that you've never seen before will spread, right? And we need no reminder to the connection to what we've seen today, right? In terms of in the last 50 years or so, the increase of STIs year upon year, something like 250,000 plus cases in the UK alone, every year increasing new cases of sexually transmitted infections. And so that's the fourth one. No, that was the third one. وَلَا طَفَّفُوا الكيل ولا طففوا الكيل إلا منعوا النبات وأخذوا بالسنين. And they don't do tatfif, this skimming across the top, right? This giving short measure to others, except that their plants will stop growing, and their crops will stop growing, and they will experience famine. Right? SubhanAllah. This is a causal relationship that Allah has connected to a tatfif. You might think, what's the connection between just, giving a few grams less when I'm selling, why would that lead to just poverty and famine and this type of stuff? This is something, someone might see a clear causal relationship, or don't know, but there is a connection there. This is part of the metaphysics behind this, the justice, right? And fifthly, the Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَا مَنَعُوا الزَّكَاةِ إِلَّا حُبِسَ عَنْهُمْ الْمَطَرِ. And they don't, stop giving their zakah except rain is prevented for them. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ said there's a connection between giving your zakah properly, on time, fairly, justly, i.e. the right of the poor people for whom to whom it actually belongs, and rain. So number one was, who remembers? Number one was, I've forgotten myself. A people doesn't betray their covenant with Allah except that Allah causes their enemies to overcome them. Number two, a people don't judge according to what Allah revealed except that poverty spreads among them. Number three, sexual promiscuity and lewdness doesn't appear or become prevalent amongst them except that death spreads throughout them or disease spreads throughout them. 4, people don't do tatfif, giving short measure, even in the slightest, this out of greed and miserliness. People don't do tatfif except that their crops are prevented and they're struck with famine. And number 5, people do not, be stingy with their zakah, except that their rain will reduce. I.e., and rain in this kind of culture, this is a sign of life. This is a sign of growth of crops of your livestock. This was wealth. This is where actual wealth and productivity came from, right? So if you are stingy, not only is there a divine censure, not only is there sin involved in an otherworldly sense, but it will harm you in this life as well. It will harm everyone, right? And that is because of certain causal relationships which Allah has put in this dunya. I remember when I was doing working with people researching on like tree bark, they said it was a sync regulated sync regulated network almost, right? So if something happens to reduce the amount of bark a tree or even fruits, you can say, a tree makes, then it will actually absorb less carbon from the atmosphere, right? So this is similar to what the Prophet ﷺ is saying here. And explicitly the Prophet ﷺ has said in other ahadith, for example, don't stop giving, supporting your poor relatives, for example. Right? Imagine you're giving, you're sponsoring a relative of yours who's poor. Right? And saying, I'm giving him this many £100 a month. But you think, if I stop giving him that, then I would have another few £100 a month to play with at the end of the month. Like the person who's doing tatfif, he thinks if I just give that person less, then I'll have more to sell to someone else and get more money. But the Prophet ﷺ said, it may be that Allah is providing you rizq just because you are giving Him rizq. Or Allah is providing You rain for the animals, not for you. Right? So if we're stingy with our zakah, right, this is where some of the money ends up. We might think, right, that we'll have that extra money left over for our own selves, but there won't be any barakah in that. Furthermore, Allah may stop the source of your income because this money that He wanted to go to these poor people is not getting to them. So He's turning off the tap, so to speak, right at the source. SubhanAllah. This is the relation between the source and the sink. The source of carbon and where it ends up, or the source of money, wealth, rain, rizq, and where it ends up. SubhanAllah. So these are just a few reflections upon these few ayat. If there's any questions.